Inspirational civil rights leader and Congressman John Lewis had a remarkable impact on the world. He also loved books. Ahead, I'll talk with the author of the picture book, Unstoppable John, how John Lewis got his library card and helped change history. Hi, I'm Dan Skinner, and welcome to the Kids Bookshelf. Pat Zietlow Miller is the New York Times bestselling, award-winning author of many picture books, including Sophie's Squash, Wherever You Go, Be Kind, Remarkably You, and many others. She joins us to talk about Unstoppable John, how John Lewis got his library card and helped change history. Pat, welcome to the Kids Bookshelf.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
John Lewis was an inspirational leader who inspired generations of people, but there may be some people who aren't aware of him. So who was John Lewis?
John Lewis was a civil rights leader from a very young age who went on to become a U.S. representative for the state of Georgia and was integral in getting a lot of our civil rights legislation passed. And he did that at great personal sacrifice, participating in marches where he was occasionally attacked and even ended up hospitalized twice.
Why was it important for you to tell John Lewis's story as a picture book?
Well, initially, I wasn't sure if I should. I had seen him win the National Book Award because he has a graphic novel series called March. That's 3 novels talking about his civil rights experience. And I saw him give his acceptance speech, and he talked about how when he was 16, he asked for a library card at his local library, and he knew that they would say no because he knew it was a whites-only library in 1956. But he did it anyway, just because he knew it was the right thing to do. And I thought that's an amazing story. And then a little later, the School Library Journal posted a picture on their website. A library in Fairfax, Virginia had seen the same speech I had and had sent Representative Lewis a thank you card and a library card to their own library saying, please come and see us anytime. And then I heard anecdotally that throughout his career, he had gotten library cards from libraries who knew his story and wanted to invite him. And so I started doing some research about the role books had played in his life. And when I found out that he had also married a librarian, that's when I knew I had enough information to turn this into a book. Because I wanted to focus just on libraries and books because he's done so many wonderful things. And there are other books that cover that more in depth, but I wanted to focus on the reading and book angle.
Since this is a picture book, for what ages would you recommend it?
It says 4 to 8, and I think it can work for the younger end, but I think it's more toward the 7, 8, 9 age group because, I mean, it's history and it has a little bit more depth. It's maybe a little longer. So sure, 4-year-olds could listen to it, but I think 7, 8, 9 is where you can really start thinking about it and asking questions and doing some reflecting.
Would you read a portion of the book for us to give us a sample of what readers are going to find here?
Yeah, I'll read the first 3 pages. This is the book, The Arts by Jerry Jordan, who is an amazing artist who ironically and surprisingly lives in the same town I do, and I didn't even know who he was until we got matched on this book. Okay, so this is the beginning. All John Lewis wanted was a book. Actually, John wanted lots of books, enough to fill a room and spill into the hall. But John's family couldn't afford books. Sure, they had a Bible, but John had already read that several times. John's grade school didn't have many books either, just a few tired hand-me-downs, and he'd already read those too. You might think you can solve John's problem. You might think John should go to the library. Libraries have books, and borrowing them doesn't cost a thing. John knew that. He knew the library had more books than he could ever read, but John knew something else too. Most libraries were for white people, and he was black. These days, of course, libraries are open to everyone. But there were different laws when John was young. Those laws weren't fair, but that didn't stop John. John believed everyone should be able to borrow books, and he knew someone had to do something to help things change. Maybe that person could be him.
I'm talking with Pat Zietlow Miller about her picture book, Unstoppable John, how John Lewis got his library card and helped change history. And our conversation will continue. If you're enjoying this discussion, please subscribe, like, and click on the bell so you know when I post new interviews. And thank you. Why do you think it's important to introduce John Lewis's story to kids at an early age?
Well, I think young kids today have grown up where anybody can walk into a library and get a library card. So I think their initial reaction is going to be like, well, what do you mean he couldn't get a library card? That's silly. Everybody can get one. But it wasn't that long ago that this was happening. My mom was born the same year that John Lewis was. And so there are people around and alive today who lived through that experience. And it's one of those things you don't want to forget. And I think it's important for kids to know U.S. history. I didn't learn nearly as much about the civil rights movement in school as I should have. I learned so much researching for this book. And also, I think, even though we've in some ways come a long way from 1956 Jim Crow laws, in other ways, with all the work going on by some groups to ban or restrict access to books, we haven't. I mean, maybe you can walk in and get a library card, but is the book that maybe you need at this particular point in your life, is it going to be on the shelf? Is it going to be easily accessible? Is your school librarian going to have it? Or are they going to think, wow, that might cause a problem, and so I'm not even going to order it? So the issue of book access is still important today.
I noticed you said you had to do a lot of research for this, and you were able to include some of that in the book. And I'll talk to you more about what's at the end of the book later, because there's additional information there. But this book is going to be read to younger children by adults. Mm-hmm. And the thing as I read through it is I learned things I didn't know about John Lewis. So this can be an educational experience for adults as well.
Yeah. I was talking to my dental hygienist. You're in there getting your teeth cleaned and they're always chatting, even if you can't often respond. And she asked me what my latest book was. And I told her, and she had never heard of John Lewis. And this is like an intelligent, educated person, but she had just never even heard his name. So I just think it's wonderful to get more about him out into the world. And like you said, in the back of my book, there's a whole list of resources of other ways to learn more about him.
Yeah, there's sort of a biography. There's a timeline. Mm-hmm. Tell us a bit about those.
Well, I learned so much when I was researching the book that wouldn't fit into, 32 pages of a picture book and wasn't necessarily about my focus on books and reading and lifelong learning. And so I wrote an author's note where I kind of like summarized John's history in the civil rights movement. I have a bibliography of all the other books that are out there about him and other videos. Like there's some amazing videos of John Lewis if you just Google on YouTube of various points of his life talking about his history. So I put that all in there. Hopefully that if people read it and had questions, whether they were kids or adults, they would be inspired to go and, use their own library card to check out a book and do some more reading.
So in addition to the story of John Lewis, there are themes in this book that I'm sure you hope that children will take away. Tell us a bit about those.
Well, one would be the importance of not giving up. I mean, John, when he walked into that library and asked for a library card, he was 16. He was from a very, very poor family, like living in a shack in Troy, Alabama. So you wouldn't necessarily look at him and think this is someone who could have a major impact on, the policies of the United States. But he went in there and did the one act he could do. And then when he got knocked down and told no, he just kept going. And that's, the unstoppable John. And I think people today of any age, that tenacity, that seeing what's right and working toward it and not giving up is something we can all learn and do and say, okay, what difference can I make, even if I'm just one person?
And of course, another theme, which was a theme of his life, was the love of books and the love of reading.
Yes. He's talked multiple times about the importance of reading. And I think reading is obviously it makes your life better and easier in all the normal ways. But it also, it increases your view of the world. It increases your empathy. You read about people who aren't like you and you're like, oh, and you realize that on some level, they're a lot like you. So it expands your view of the world, which I think is so important for people growing up that, not everybody is like you. And you can learn from that and you can respect that.
You've written many books for children. So what's next for you?
I have a book coming out in September called One Can Be. And it's all about, it's kind of an ode to introverts and quiet leaders, that quiet kid who has a lot going on underneath and is again, making a difference in the world. And I'm a huge introvert. And I wrote it during the pandemic when everybody was kind of forced to be an introvert. But it's just coming out now and I'm excited about it. Because I think, there's a lot of quiet kids who have a lot going on, but they just sort of get like maybe looked over because they're not out there being really, on and dramatic.
The picture book is Unstoppable John: How John Lewis Got His Library Card and Helped Change History by Pat Zietlow Miller. Pat, thank you for talking with me today.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.
If you'd like to purchase Unstoppable John, I've placed a link for you in the description below. If you enjoyed this conversation, please subscribe, like, and click on the bell so you know when I post new interviews. Meanwhile, here are 2 more books you might find interesting. Thank you for watching this edition of the Kids Bookshelf. I'm Dan Skinner. Until next time, keep sharing the gift of reading.